circus because I was going to be a circus star, not one of the little girls who walk in the parade. I was going to be a real performer. There's a circus training school in our town, and I begged Mom to send me. She said it'd be real hard work. I didn't care. And she said this year I would watch all the acts real carefully, so I would be sure what I wanted to be. I loved them all. Tumblers, animals, trainers, and high wire. But I knew what I wanted to be, a trapeze acrobat. I wanted to fly through the air. When the training school started, I was scared and excited. And we began on push-ups, handstands, and I was thrown in the air a lot. I didn't understand. Where was the trapeze? They said I had to learn step by step, train special muscles for each special movement, and I didn't always do it right. So we did it over and over. But still no trapeze. Stretching, somersaults, and even how to bow. And then, the day they said I was ready for the trapeze, ready to put it all together. But I was scared. They helped. They told me I'd be fine, and they helped me push off. And I was doing it. I was flying. I could already see myself as I was going to be, the star of the trapeze.
Serena's on her way to becoming the circus star she dreams of being. She's not yet flying through the air with the greatest of ease, and much of her training will still be push-ups and flips. But she'll do them with the sparkle in her eye that comes from keeping her goal in mind. Her training is what psychologists call operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is simply learning done step by step. There's nothing new about step-by-step learning, but for many of us, it's a random hit-or-miss process. In operant conditioning, the steps are carefully guided, and each successful step is rewarded.
Look at these two pigeons playing ping pong. What's the reward for them? Here's a man learning to wiggle his ears. What's his reward? And what do the pigeons and the man have in common? They've learned tricks, and they've learned them through practice. The pigeons get a food reward when they score, and maybe the man thinks he'll be a hit at parties. The food and the recognition are the rewards we call positive reinforcement. Most of us respond to rewards each day.
Derek's ready. Derek's looking up here. Good job.
A word of praise in school, a professional pat on the back. Both are positive reinforcements.
12 again. 12. 12 right here. You were perfect.
Mom, I'm hungry. We're going to have dinner in 20 minutes.
I want an ice cream cone.
You can't have an ice cream
I
cone.
want...
In some situations that we don't think of as learning situations, we use rewards incorrectly. We reward the wrong behavior. Not intentionally. But what behavior is this child learning? What is he being rewarded for? The boy's mother rewarded his tantrum. He has learned that a tantrum will get him what he wants. His mother could have punished him. Sometimes punishment works, but the goal of learning is to bring about permanent change in behavior. Human beings often seem to respond to punishment, but the effect may be temporary. The first clue to changing behavior by a learning process came from Ivan Pavlov in the early 1900s. Dogs salivate naturally in response to food, but when food and the sound of a bell appear together time after time, the dogs associate the bell with food. Eventually, they salivate merely from hearing the bell. This learning is called classical conditioning. But Pavlov's experiments were restricted to involuntary physiological responses. What about other responses other than the basic physiological ones? Researchers began to study conditioning in learned behavior. Watch this sea lion, for example. He's learning to catch rings because he's trained to associate catching rings with a reward of tasty, fresh fish. First, he's warmed up with a fish snack. He catches the ring. And gets another fish reward. Oops, the trainer dropped a ring, so the sea lion takes care of it and reminds her that she's missing a ring. That tap on the leg seems spontaneous, but it's part of the act, learned through conditioning. The sea lion has been conditioned to perform each step in the act. Conditioning seems to work well for animals, but what about people? Actually, where simple behavior is involved, a human being doesn't act much different than an animal. This clown on water skis learned his act for the rewards of applause and a living, and he maintains his skill through practice. Practice makes perfect is a familiar phrase, and it wasn't new 50 years ago when psychologist Edward Thorndike called it his first law of learning. Thorndike was attempting to analyze the learning process. Most of us practice eagerly when we feel that we're making progress toward a goal. Riding a bike. Balancing on a beam, careful to make each step right. We learn, as in typing, through practice. But practice makes perfect only when we can see improvement. This was Thorndike's second law, the law of effect. It states, very simply, that seeing improvement is essential to the learning process. This woman's rapid typing shows the result of practice, but the speed would be useless if the typing was inaccurate. She learned accuracy through the law of effect, watching her improvement and repeating what she saw was right. An active sport like water skiing can help us see how Thorndike's two laws of learning work. First, the law of practice. This woman starts on dry land so that she can see what motions may work. Then, into the water for a try. Oops, that didn't work. She won't do that again. But some more tries. She sees improvement, and she's demonstrating the law of effect. She's water skiing.
Thorndike's laws were a start toward understanding the learning process. Other researchers analyzed the learning process in more detail. This man, psychologist B.F. Skinner, broke the process down to specific steps. He described the step process as shaping. He called this shaping a major factor in operant conditioning and believed that operant conditioning could control all animal or human behavior. In one experiment, Skinner trained pigeons to turn in a circle to get food pellets. First, the pigeon is taught to turn part of the way. Then further, until the pigeon makes a whole turn.
A boy can also be trained to behave in certain ways to get food. He's been conditioned to getting it by putting a quarter in a machine. What happens when the boy puts a quarter in the machine and he doesn't get a soda?
That's beautiful. Thanks.
Hey, that's really good work.
Why, thank you.
It looks beautiful. You're doing a real good job.
Skinner emphasized that the pigeon and the boy behaved as they did because of the food rewards, the positive reinforcers. But positive reinforcement comes in many forms besides food. There are many ways that people are rewarded for behavior, but there is also negative reinforcement. These rats jump to avoid the electric shock. Avoiding the shock is called negative reinforcement. What reinforcement is this girl receiving?
What's that supposed to be?
A tree.
Doesn't look like a tree to me.
When the girl decides to stop painting to avoid criticism, it's negative reinforcement. Conditioning occurs constantly in our lives, and we often don't even recognize it. Animal trainers use operant conditioning to achieve a specific goal. Take this bear, Toko, for example. How would you train Toko to climb on a stool, sit down, and turn around? This trainer shows how this trick is broken down into a series of steps. First, Toko explores the territory. Knowing that food will appear, he tries different behaviors. The researcher reinforces the food with a sound when Toko makes the right response. The reward for the exploratory behavior shapes Toko's response in the right direction. Very quickly, Toko learns which response is being encouraged. Once Toko has learned the first step, the trainer works to get the second foot on the stool. Toko gets his reward when he puts the other foot on the stool. Soon, Toko has all 4 feet on the stool. Then he learns to sit. He's rewarded for a slight turn. And finally, he does a full turn. He's rewarded again. And here's the full trick. Toko was eager to learn throughout the experiment. He knew he would be rewarded quickly, and he actively searched for the behavior that would earn the reward. Now Toko can perform the trick over and over. The training is a success. Applying operant conditioning to human beings is accomplished in much the same way. Anna, a retarded child who has never walked unassisted, was the subject of a dramatic conditioning experiment. Anna makes her way back and forth between chairs to eat spoonsful of ice cream. Gradually, the distance between chairs increases. Soon she is using a rope for support. Then the rope is slackened. And cut. For a while, she still falls when the rope is taken away. Until finally, she is walking without any help at all. So operant conditioning can shape many kinds of both human and animal behavior through positive reinforcement. In some circus acts today, even the wild animals are trained with the most gentle of reinforcers, love. These tigers are fierce, dangerous, man-killers. They're fed raw meat and would eat any meat thrown in the cage. Usually when tigers are trained for circus acts, they learn their tricks through whippings and cruel punishment. But a trainer named Harry Thomas uses a different system.
I use a type of training which I call affection training, and in this we've gotten away from the old school, which we call the whip, gun, and chair type of training, and we use more of a one-to-one relationship with the animal. We try to find what tricks or behaviors best suit the cat. Usually I watch the cat playing, and in playing I see a particularly good jumping cat or a rollover cat, and so then we reward the cat from there and pick up what it does best instead of trying to force it into something.
And a tiger stands over Harry Thomas, who puts himself at the mercy of his animals. It's actually part of the performance, but nevertheless a risk of life. Is he certain of the tiger's affection for him, or of the permanence of his training? One or the other, because there's no way he could get to his feet in time to run from a suddenly attacking tiger. Training animals is a familiar use of operant conditioning, but psychologist Skinner was convinced that all animal and human behavior is only the product of operant conditioning. However, Skinner's theory, called behaviorism, met a great deal of criticism. His colleagues challenged his attitude that if you can't measure it, forget it. Operant conditioning doesn't cover all varieties of human behavior, they said. Creativity, for example. When a sculptor chisels the smooth curves of his vision from a rough chunk of stone, how much of his sculpture is practice and how much is the workings of his mind? Creativity, said Skinner's critics, is difficult, if not impossible, to measure. And what about motivation? Some people climb mountains. They're not on their way to someplace on the other side of the mountain. They just climb mountains. What is the motivation? Some may climb to look down on the beauty of the land below, or because climbing is an exhilarating sport, or because overcoming dangers gives a sense of conquest. But all climbers practice and plan many hours for these moments in the beauty and danger of the mountain. They condition body and mind to respond without thinking to what must be done when a rope slackens or a foothold crumbles. Survival is motivation for the training. But why risk death to reach the top of a mountain? We can't measure the motivations of other people, but we do know that each of us is motivated towards certain goals. Skinner had trouble explaining motivation in terms of operant conditioning. Motivation is an internal force rather than an external reward. And animals also have moments when they seem capable of more complex forms of learning. One researcher did an experiment, now famous, in which a chimp named Sultan demonstrated a flash of insight. In the original experiment, the chimp was confronted with some bananas that were out of reach. No matter what Sultan tried, he got no closer to the bananas. Then Sultan was offered 2 sticks. Sultan eyed the sticks and the bananas for several hours. Aha! Sultan had realized that he could join the sticks and use them to pull the bananas closer. His sudden realization is called an aha, or insight response. But we still don't understand insight. Is it a single leap to a conclusion, an explosive aha, or is it a series of tiny steps? Skinner's theories did not explain Sultan's insight response any better than they explained an artist's creativity or a mountain climber's motivation. And what about language? In this classroom, tapes and headphones help these students learn French. They listen to experts speak the language. They repeat. They listen again, each controlling his own equipment at his own pace. They learn much, but the possible combinations of words and thoughts within a language are so numerous that all of them can't be learned by practice. New combinations appear constantly in writing and speaking. And Skinnerian theory has trouble explaining the arts in behaviorist terms. People can learn to use the tools of an artist's trade, but the artist's vision can't be taught. True, technical experience and training and practice are valuable. But something more is needed for true art. An opera, for example, combines many arts. Where do the results of practice leave off and the inspiration begin? For all the behaviors operant conditioning might not explain, it does apply in many ways. Learning football plays is an example.
What are they called?
Offensive team.
They're called the offensive team. That's right, Earl. Go ahead and take a drag.
Earl is mentally retarded. He's a good example of a person unable to affect the things that go on around him. He is silent, withdrawn, and he smokes 4 packs of cigarettes a day. In an attempt to help Earl talk with other patients about things they are interested in, his teacher uses operant conditioning to teach him some of the basics of football. Earl gets a puff on his cigarette as a reward for correct answers. He develops the fundamentals of communication, and because he is talking, he has less time to smoke cigarettes. He has learned to control himself and his environment in a small way.
That's good, Earl. Take a drag.
Biofeedback also relies on the principles of operant conditioning to cure headaches or lower blood pressures. It also requires a goal and a step-by-step way of getting there. The biofeedback machine simply allows you to see physiological changes recorded as electronic impulses. Aversion therapy is another, more rigorous therapy that uses operant conditioning. Can't stop smoking? This woman receives a jolt of electricity as she goes through her smoking ritual. Soon, her body makes the connection between the smoking routine and the unpleasant shock.
Is that painful?
No, it's
Is it
uncomfortable.
Okay, fine. We'll call that your level then.
As a result of the conditioning, the woman may become less inclined to smoke. This aversion therapy uses punishment. The woman is rewarded for stopping smoking. The reward is that she does not get shocked. Heavy drinkers are also candidates for aversion therapy. This man has electrodes attached to his fingers, and he will receive a shock as he takes a drink. He will soon relate the shock to the drink, and he may think twice before drinking heavily in the future. Such harsh conditioning may be necessary when behavior is out of control. And operant conditioning can be useful in the inevitable battle of the bulge. Your eating habits can also be conditioned. But the most effective form of weight loss involves learning new eating behaviors. Most weight loss programs modify eating habits step by step and use progress records as reinforcement. This girl weighs herself every evening and writes down her step-by-step results. The results can be a tremendous reward.
Operant conditioning is basically an optimistic approach to teaching and learning. And yet there's been controversy over Skinner's theories. But Skinner has made us conscious that learning by reward is an effective tool. He may have fitted one of the pieces in the puzzle of human behavior.